You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to another episode of Business Wealth Impact. We have a great guest today, Kris Olivo, who is the co-founder of Almost Magical Marketing, and we'll tell you in a little bit why it's called that, an award-winning franchise marketing agency. He also co-founded Endorse Me, which is a testimonial platform for people making impact. He's also the co-author of the book, The Grand Opening Game Plan. And outside of that, Kris is a world champion in jiu-jitsu and a black belt. Welcome, Kris.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
Absolute pleasure. I just love how diverse you are in everything you do. And while you're a full-time jiu-jitsu champion. So let's talk about, because you were telling me a minute ago, and I want to just get straight into this. You were telling me about your experiences with your startup. So tell us what happened with your startup experience.
So it really started with kind of a point of pain in how I found entrepreneurship. I was in the military at the time. I was about 3 years in, and I was really, really miserable. I was stuck in a job that I didn't want to do, in a place where I didn't want to be. And I started looking for an escape, basically. And so that escape led me not only to martial arts, but entrepreneurship, where I had the epiphany one day. I was like, my problem isn't necessarily the military, right? Because the reason I didn't like the military was because of the people I was working with and where I was working. I was like, that's a facet of everyday life. If I transition to the civilian world, there's no guarantee that I'm not gonna be in that same situation. And so I got it in my head. I was like, okay, well, you need to work for yourself. So you need to figure that out. And so it was about 3 years into the military where I had kind of the calling for entrepreneurship. And prior to that, I had, made some money online before, and we can talk about that a little bit. It's kind of an interesting story, but that's really where entrepreneurship started for me, was kind of out of that place of pain. First company I launched was with a friend. It was a nightlife website we were building. That got really expensive. So we pivoted and tried to do something smaller. And so we started launching mobile apps. We had some success with it, and I mean, we broke even on some of the apps we made. But then that got expensive. And a large part of it was marketing, right? We were spending a lot of money on agencies and stuff like that. And so I started thinking, okay, well, I can cut costs if I specialize in this, and I learned how to do this myself. So I started learning how to do advertising, stuff like that. And then I actually started my own agency after me and my partner dissolved the app company because the timing was wrong. It was still really expensive to develop. And it's not like a model that cash flows easily. You have to build something for months without knowing whether it's going to make money or not. Right.
Right. You have to wait.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I was on a military salary doing this. And so everything was bootstrapped. And so I got it in my head, I was like, I need to sell a service that can get me paid today. And so that's when I was like, well, what if I package my marketing services and I offer them to local businesses that don't know what I do? And so I started a small agency right as I was leaving the military that paid my bills for a couple months. It went decently well, but then I realized I didn't know how to grow a business. And so I spoke to my mentor, and he told me about some of the startups. He's in private equity. He's a Wall Street guy, Harvard grad, super smart dude. And he was like, well, you should go work in the startup world. And so I went to work for one of the startups that he was somewhat involved in. And I worked there for 2 years before it completely imploded, and I had to start my life all over again.
Okay, so tell us now. That's interesting, because we usually hear stories of the startup guys, and it's, hey, bro, come on. And it literally is, hey, bro, come and work for us.
Yeah.
And put some money in, and you're going to drive off in a Ferrari.
Yep.
So that's not what happened. And you were telling me before that you actually lost money. You put some money in?
I lost a ton of money. I never got it back either.
Wow. So you invested in the company as well.
I didn't invest as in having a buy-in, but when I joined, right, from the outside in, you see this company. The founder is in Forbes. The founder's in getting written about on every major media outlet.
Mhm.
You Google this person, you're like, wow, this person's really, really smart. They're really well accomplished.
Mm.
And you start to hang around these people. Like at the time, my mentor was introducing me to people, and I was going to like celebrity parties. I was like at
Mm.
Snoop Dogg's house at one point. Like,
Mm.
and so I was like brushing shoulders with all these important people. And from the outside looking in, the startup was like, yo, this is like an opportunity I can't miss. And I'm glad I took it because it definitely grew me as a person. But once
Mhm.
I was in, I went from working my way up as a personal assistant to the CEO, um, and eventually becoming the director of sales there before I
Mm.
ended up leaving. And so it was all glam and glitz from the outside, but
Mhm.
internally it was a hot mess. Like there was
Mm.
so many issues going on, and payroll was really inconsistent.
Mm.
What kind of won me over was the idea that like everybody in the company had shares. And so
Ah.
I joined at a really good time and I saw how good things could be, even though I didn't
Mm.
really understand the financing underneath it.
Mhm.
But like when I joined shortly after, we were on trips to Mexico, at all inclusive retreats, doing all this like
Mm.
fancy startup stuff that you see like on TV. That was my
Mm.
life for a period. I remember going to a party and there being giraffes
That's
outside.
expensive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Right. Right.
And yeah, but once I was actually in it, like I was still doing this stuff, but I wasn't getting paid. We were missing payroll left
Wow.
and right. And so yeah, it didn't go well.
So let's analyze that. This happens a lot, right?
Hmm.
It's the glam life. There's drafts, there's people being written up, there's Snoop Dogg, there's famous people, but inside the company, nobody's being paid.
Yep.
What was their problem? Why does this happen?
Um, I think it's a matter of priorities, right? The company was really, really set on being an explosive growth, fast growth company. They wanted to do an exit relatively short. And so
Mm.
they spent a lot of money on trying to make them look further along than they were.
Oh, perception.
Yeah, it was all perception because this is how you get investors. This is how you get more
Oh.
media attention is by doing all these things. But the
Mm.
infrastructure wasn't solid. So it's like
Mm.
you're coming into a company and the sales aren't there, but the media, the publications, all that
Mm.
stuff, all the influencers, that's all there. But it's not translating to sales at the end of the day. And so my job was to go sell people stuff. And I
Right.
remember like I didn't even join for sales. I was just trying to learn how to run a business. And
Right.
I worked really good as executive assistant. And there was a day where our founder asked me if I could help the sales team
Mhm.
because they needed to do. There was two different parts of the business. There was a brick and mortar, right?
Mhm.
B2C sales. So we were a distributor and manufacturing, and we had all that vertically integrated basically. And we would sell directly to the people that were retailing it. And then there was
Mhm.
also the B2C side where we were
Mm.
selling it online, which,
Right.
that can get messy because then you're kind of competing with your retailers.
Right.
And I was asked to go do in person visits
Mhm.
to drop off product and talk to the purchasing managers at each of these locations.
Mhm.
And on an average day, a salesperson on our team at the time could visit between 4 to 6 locations.
Mm. Mhm.
And I walked in there without knowing what was good and what wasn't. Right. I've always been
Mm.
a maximum effort kind of a person. And
Yeah.
so whenever I bite into something, I really get into it. And
Mhm.
so I had no basis of like, where's the line? No one told me anything. So I went in there and I visited like 18 locations
Mhm.
on my first day. And then the
Right.
CEO was like, how are you able to do 18 and everybody else does 6? I was like, I don't know how they're only able to do 6.
Because they're not you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They weren't really out there.
There's a lesson in and I love that, grit, determination, and persistence, and also going the extra mile. Just because people are normally doing 6, they didn't think, "Gee, maybe I should do more,"
Yeah.
because generally don't people don't think like you. Okay. So what don't tell me the company if you don't want to, but what was the service or product?
It was in the cannabis industry. So it was in the
Ah,
CBD
okay.
industry. Yeah.
Which was probably early on then for that kind of thing.
It was very early on. We were some of the pioneers of that industry because it was
Mm.
right as it was starting to boom. Yeah.
Okay, I get it. All right, so when you exited that, you then were saying that you couldn't afford your $100 car payment.
Yeah, yeah. I was supposed to drive off, like you mentioned. I had shares in the company, right? Which shares
Mm,
in a company that's not worth anything mean zero,
mean nothing,
right?
yes.
And so we were all promised, oh, we're going to have a big exit. Everybody's going to walk away
Mhm,
financially sound. And there was always like these little glimmers of hope, right? Things would get
mhm,
really, really bad. People were struggling to buy food. Like at the time,
mm,
I was like, literally, we were going to like throwing these big events, and I would like go back to my apartment and I would just be eating peanut butter or like Little Caesars because I had no
wow,
money, I had no cash.
yeah,
And so there was always these little glimmers of hope where like more
mhm,
money would come in, and
mhm,
then like people would get paid a little bit. You
mm,
would never get paid 100% what you were owed in back
mhm,
pay, but it would just be a little bit more to string you along, and you're like,
yes,
okay, well, we'll figure it out. Right. And
right,
so I was supposed to exit with enough money to drive off in a Ferrari. That was like
right,
the analogy that was given to me. When I
mhm,
exited, I couldn't even afford, I had an older BMW at the time, like a
mhm,
2005,
mhm,
and I couldn't even afford to make $100 car payment on that, and it got repossessed. So I went from
wow,
driving off in a Ferrari to literally
no
getting my
car.
car repossessed. And at the time it got repossessed, it was already broken. I couldn't even drive it.
Anyway, so may as well just get it lit repossessed. Okay, so this is an interesting story of a startup gone wrong. We don't hear a lot of these stories. We just hear about the success stories. However, most startups don't last. They don't
Yeah,
make it.
a lot of them don't.
So a big lesson in not how to not manage people, right? And how to not do things. Okay,
Yeah.
so then you had no car. Could you afford rent at that point?
Oh, I had at that time, because here's the thing, I don't like acting like a victim, but there were certain things that happened that like made it even more particularly difficult.
Mm.
Like the founder had told the state that they paid me severance pay, so I didn't qualify for unemployment, even
They
though,
actually lied.
yeah, they
Wow, so you
lied
couldn't
about
get
it.
unemployment. That's
Yeah, I
terrible.
didn't get any severance. They told them I got like 6 grand and I got $0.
So these people shouldn't be in business at all because they're unethical.
No,
Okay,
no, they shouldn't.
it
Yeah.
should be done. All right. So then what did you do? You somehow got into franchising. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I kind of, while I was at that startup, I met my current business partner, Heather Cutler. And
Mhm.
so we had one day while we were working at our warehouse at that startup, we were making product. And like I had talked to her and we were just kind of dreaming. I've always been kind of a
Mm,
dreamer. And I was like, hey, what do you want to do when we exit? Like, what's your next plan? And she
mhm,
was like, I don't really know. I was like, what are you going to do with the money? And she's like, I have no idea yet. I haven't really thought it through. And I was like,
mm,
I think I'm going to start my own company again. I think that's what I'm going to go back to because I don't know what else to do with myself. And I was like, I thought to myself, her and I work really, really well together. She was like the most trustworthy person there. We were always like
mm,
working side by side. And
mhm,
anytime I got overwhelmed, she was always there to jump in and help. A lot of integrity with her. And so
mhm,
I had looked at her and I was like, if I do that, would you want to join me and like,
mhm,
go through this adventure again? And she
mhm.
was like, yeah, I would.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, cool. And at that time, I still had some hope. And then when the company imploded,
Mhm.
right, we had found out that a lot of fraud and embezzling was going on. Basically, like investor money
As
was
well.
being used for other stuff, right? We had
Mhm.
a wire come through, and then it was like, I can't say the amount of money, but it was a substantial amount of money, and it was blown within like a couple days while the founder was on vacation in Hawaii. She spent
Oh,
it all on
wow.
herself, right? And we found
Amazing.
out she also never missed a payday. She always paid her husband. And
Mm,
so when we left, right? Because
mhm,
we basically had like a come to Jesus meeting, like
mhm,
all the leadership at the startup while
mhm,
she was in Hawaii started digging through everything, and we were like,
mhm.
"Yo, like this is crazy." And
Yeah,
so we all basically quit at the same time.
got it. She came back to no business.
Yeah, basically. And
Mhm.
there was like one or two people that stayed that I'm like, dude, how
Why?
like we accept the love we think we deserve, and
Yes.
clearly you have.
I can see that when you put that much time in, it's hard to admit that that was for nothing, you know?
It's hard to separate, but
Really hard.
when you
Mhm.
know empirically that you are getting screwed over and you
You
choose to
gotta
stay
leave.
anyway, like,
Yeah.
you got to have a conversation with yourself. And so I looked at Heather right after we both left, and I
Mhm,
was like, okay, well, remember that conversation we had a long time ago
mhm,
about starting a business? And she was like, yeah.
mm,
I was like, well, we were supposed to start it with money. Do you want to start it
mm.
with no money
No money,
instead?
no money.
And she was like, I don't have anything else to do. And I was like, all
Right.
right, screw it. Let's do it. And so
Okay,
she's like, what kind of
awesome.
business? And
Mhm.
AMM was born.
Okay, so then you got into franchising and you're doing pretty well now, right? You have a marketing agency for franchises,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. What made you do that? Why that?
We stumbled into it just like most
Mm,
entrepreneurs stumble into whatever they end up doing. We had some we put up a website, we started like visiting different businesses. It was kind of funny. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Step Brothers, where
no.
yeah, there's a scene in Step Brothers where one of the brothers gets an interview, but both of them will show up to the interview and they're wearing
Mm,
like tuxedos, and like
mm,
it's absolutely ridiculous. Like imagine you go to interview somebody and they bring somebody else, they're like, yeah, this person's getting interviewed with me.
mhm,
And so we actually did that. So we
mhm,
looked up jobs for marketing that people were
right,
putting out there into the world in Las Vegas, right? People that were hiring
mhm,
for CMOs, people that were hiring for just marketing managers, advertising managers. We would apply. Now, at that point, our resumes looked pretty good with all the stuff that we were able to do at the startup. Like
mhm,
we sold products to TJ Maxx and stuff like that at one
yeah,
point. And so we got a lot of interviews. And so
mhm,
we would show up, both of us, to the interview. And I'd be like, hey, I know the interview's for me, but this is actually my business partner and we have a proposal for you. And then
got
we
it,
would pitch them. We're like, hey, instead of bringing us on as W-2s, we would
yeah,
explain our story, blah, blah,
mhm,
blah, everything. I'm like, why don't you bring us on as contractors? You pay us a fraction of the price, you get both of us.
right,
And a lot of people found that interesting and kind of funny. Some people were
mhm,
like, well, we'll consider it.
mhm,
At the end of the day, everyone said no because they wanted to bring us on as W-2s. So they're like,
yes,
hey, we
yeah,
can't bring you on as a contractor. We really want to own your time,
yeah,
basically. So can you guys both come on as W-2s? And we got several job offers and it would have been
mhm,
easy. One person
yeah,
offered us shares in another company, in a medical device company. And
mm,
Heather had talked me out of it. I was like, Heather, they said shares. And she's like, Kris, no.
we've been through this.
Yeah, we've already done this, Kris. And I'm
Never done
like,
that one.
okay, no, Kris. And then so one of the leads that we ended up working was a franchise. It was a kids hair
Mm,
salon in Las
mhm,
Vegas. And so we showed up, to talk to the owner. We had no idea it was a franchise at the time.
mhm,
And we told him exactly what we would do. We're like, hey, based off he hadn't opened yet, so it was a grand opening, and
mm,
I was like, well, based off of this, like based off of your business, who your consumers are, like this is exactly what we would do strategy wise, and we just laid it all out. And he's like, okay, let's try it. And I was like, done. All right. So then we went and we started working on those campaigns, creating all the assets we needed, all the tech stuff. And at the time, the way the franchise did everything was their grand openings were a lot of print materials, flyers. They hadn't really run a lot of digital ads and stuff like that. They had tried a couple different companies in the past, but none of them worked out. So they were sticking to what
mm,
they knew. And
mhm,
so at that time, we were working with just a franchisee. The franchisor was looking to like help the franchisees, and so they had hired another company to do another pilot for the Las
mm,
Vegas location, another digital marketing company. So we were competing against another company, and the franchisee was like, hey, just so you know, there's just other companies that's going to be working on the campaign too, that corporate hired.
mm,
He's like, I wanted somebody local,
mhm,
and so you guys are basically competing against each other.
and then you won.
Yeah, we won by a long shot. Like
You
I
won.
think I think they had like 4 redemptions on the offer for the
Mhm,
whole weekend, that they
mhm,
did, and we were at like 87 or something.
amazing.
And so,
Okay,
yeah, it wasn't even close. We broke a
so
record,
let's
actually.
let's fast forward to now. You have this successful business, it's doing well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and what I'm fascinated by is that you're also a full-time athlete. Tell us how you fit all that in.
So, it's a lot. My days are really long and they're very routine based. And that started at the same time that I got into entrepreneurship. I needed a physical outlet because like my
Mhm.
health was getting a little out of control. I was overweight.
Mm.
I just wasn't proud of myself. Right. And so I had always wanted to do martial arts as a kid. I didn't know which kind of martial arts, but I grew up like super poor in like a
Mm.
inner city in New Jersey. And like
Mm.
it just wasn't a thing that I could do. And
Right.
so at the time, I had been going to school for computer science because I had this idea and I thought I needed to learn how to code. And then I
Mm.
realized one day, I was like, I don't need to learn how to code. I need to be able to hire people that know how to code.
Yes.
And so I was burnt out because the military had me working like 80 hours a week. On
Mm.
top of that, I was a full time student. I was taking 4 classes a semester.
Mm.
And like I was just neglecting other areas of my life. And I was like, I want to do something that's rewarding for me and something that I've always wanted to do. So I got into martial arts, MMA
Mm.
specifically at the time. I got addicted, much like I do anything else that I really like. And
Mhm.
so, fast forward, it's been 9 years since that moment. I train every day, 6 days a week,
Mhm.
sometimes
Mhm.
seven,
Mhm.
on average around 3 hours, sometimes four a night.
Mm.
And it's really about a matter of routine. A lot of
Mhm.
people talk to me and they're like, wow, you have so much discipline. You're training every day. I'm like, it's really not discipline for me. It's something I
Mm.
love doing. Like,
Mm.
I don't feel right when I don't do it. So it's
Mhm.
not like I really need to motivate myself. Like, the amount of days that I don't want to train are rare.
Because you're probably not feeling well or something.
Yeah, it's just like something's off or I'm just too sore or broken. But
Yeah.
like for the most part, there's just like no discipline involved for me because I just like I love it.
And you told me that before, and I thought about that. That's true. It's you need the motivation when you're not really loving it. You know, most people don't love exercise, but they'll do it because of the rewards, and that's a good thing. So you said that you are. What are your prizes? You're a world champion. What have you won?
Yeah, so I've won national titles. I've won a world title at brown belt. Brown belt was when I really started to like double down and commit because I had competed
Mm.
at every level. On average in jiu-jitsu it takes about 10 years for somebody to get a black belt.
Mhm.
I competed at white belt, blue belt, purple, brown, and black pretty consistently. Brown
Mm.
was where I really got kind of a fire underneath me because I was
Mhm.
like, this is my last colored belt until I become a
Mhm.
black belt. And if I don't win something really significant, I'm going to feel like a failure. And so I was like,
Mm.
in order for me to win something significant, I'm going to have to really commit to this. And so I had came back from a 3 month van trip. Me and my business partner, we built we converted a van into
Mhm.
like you know how you see them with the beds and
Yes.
all that stuff. And so
Mhm.
we drove across the countries for 3 months. We went all the way from
Mhm.
Vegas all the way up to Boston and back. And I got a little overweight and out of shape on that trip because I
Mhm.
wasn't training regularly. I
Mhm.
came back and I jumped into a competition, as I typically do whenever something's available with no preparation. I lost first round and I was like, man, that sucks. I'm so sick of doing this. I'm so sick of losing.
Mm.
It was very intermittent for me coming up. At white belt, I won everything. I thought I was like God's gift to the earth. Blue belt, it was really rough at first. Then I started winning a lot. Purple belt, I couldn't. It was really difficult for me to win, and I was getting
Mm.
like second and third place, stuff like that. And so after I lost that tournament at brown belt, I was like, all right, let's see what happens if I actually put in more effort, right? If I make this
Mm.
a little bit more difficult for myself by being more disciplined. And
Mhm.
so I committed. I started lifting weights. So I lost all the weight that I had gained. I turned it into muscle. I started dialing in on my nutrition more. And then I started competing a lot more. So I started traveling to
Mm.
compete. Prior to that, I
Mm.
would never travel to compete unless it was like a drive 3 hours or something like that.
Mhm.
But I mean, I was flying all over the country. I flew to like Missouri, like all sorts of different places to go compete. On average, I was probably doing like 2 competitions a month,
Mhm.
as opposed to like one every quarter to 6 months. And that year, I won like 99% of what I did because I was doing it so much. So I was a number one ranked brown belt in my division, in my age division, in gi and in no gi. Gi is like the traditional kimono thing that you wear in
Mhm.
jiu-jitsu.
Mhm.
And then I won a national title that year, which was American Nationals in gi and no gi. And then I went on to win no gi worlds, which is the world title. And then I got promoted to black belt on the podium by my
Wow.
instructor.
Amazing. Okay, listening to all this, really, it's just been your will and determination that has gotten. It's not like you had training from a kid. You just decided, just going to get good at this. And obviously, you had some physical talent to be able to do that. So, this has been fascinating. So what would you say to people with all your lessons in sports and determination and business? What
Yeah.
would you say to people? What's your main philosophy of success?
Mm. I have a couple that I lean into a lot. One, there's a tattoo on my leg that's boats on fire. I'm a big fan of burning the boats and going all in on something when you
Mm,
really believe in it. Because I look at everything like there's a fixed cost to success, right? Part of that fixed cost is pain, tribulations, adversity, failure, right? And there's no bargaining over it. And so one of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Rudyard Kipling, and it goes something like, if you didn't get what you want in life, it's because A, you didn't actually want it, or B, you try to bargain over the price. And so
mm,
I look at life through that scope. I'm like, if I want to be great, there's no shortcuts. I have to dive in, I have to commit, and I have to have the discipline and consistency to keep showing up. And so for
mm,
me, if I was giving a piece of advice, I would say you want to think, but don't think too much, because
mm,
often we'll spend a lot of time in prep mode and we'll think about everything that can go wrong. And then it kind of paralyzes us. And like, I'm sure you resonate with this. If you look at your journey and everything that you had to go through to get where you are,
mhm,
and if you knew that ahead of time, would it change how you approach and what you do? And so I feel like a lot of people, if they knew all the negatives, if I knew that
mhm,
like my credit score was going to drop into like the low fives into the high fours, if I
mm,
knew that my car was going to get repossessed, if I knew that
mm,
I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from, all
mhm,
in order for me to live this dream that I'm living right now, would I still go through it? And
mm,
so I don't think a lot of people would. It's intimidating. And so I think the best thing you can do is decide on something and then jump into it and see where it takes you, because
mm,
it's not often the first decision that we make that's going to lead to where we are now. It's a collection of them. And so I had to just keep showing up and refusing to not give up. And so that led me to where I am now. I had the app company, I had the website, I had the startup, I had even a magic trick business at one point. Like I had so many different things that I stumbled through to end up where I am now. And there was no way for me to predict what I'm doing right now. There was no way for me to
mm.
do that without just stumbling.
Read the good stuff there because I find a lot of entrepreneurs and business people, they just think that there's one formula, they're just going to apply that and they're going to be successful. And
Yeah.
I've never heard any successful person tell me that that's how it worked because it didn't work that way for me. Certainly wasn't for you. So that's great stuff there that we've got to just not overthink stuff because we overthink we're in paralysis
Yep.
and go all in and see if it works or not. If it doesn't, well, maybe do something else, right?
Hmm.
But I think that what you're saying is true. If we knew there was going to be tribulation, we'd say, "Oh, that's going to be too hard." Okay, so maybe this la la land people are in is helping them because it's ignorance and bliss
Yeah.
of what might be on the other side. Um, However, I find a lot of people have this misconception about how things should be in a business. Like I should just do this. I should be a success because I've heard those people all talking about how successful they are.
Hmm.
But again, no hugely successful person didn't get there without a lot of teething problems. Maybe there was one or two, there are some unicorns, let's agree. They just had a lot of luck all of a sudden and nothing bad happened. But then some of those people that have a lot of luck early on and everything, then later on they burn and something
Yeah.
happens and everything's lost. So that's good stuff there. Okay. And also the nod to that was your business is called magical marketing, right?
Yeah.
Because you had a magic business, right? And that was one of your first online businesses?
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. We were when we were coming up with the name, we went with almost magical marketing for a
Mm,
couple different reasons. One, we didn't want to be like too full of ourselves. We wanted to lead with
mm,
transparency. And so we're like, let's put an almost in there and
mhm,
not like just say we're in magical marketing because that's kind
mm,
of cheesy.
mhm,
And so part of that was a magic background. Part of it was like, I want to articulate the level of effort that we'll put in without
mm,
overselling it. And
mm,
so that's what led us there. We ended up choosing a llama as our mascot because it kind of just fit the brand. It's,
mhm,
it's a little silly. Llamas
mhm,
are pretty smart creatures. They're a little feisty, and they're
mm,
kind of like magical in their own sense.
mm,
And so all that made sense. But going back to the magic business, that was the first money that I ever made online. And that came from a
Mm.
random obsession I had too while I was in the military.
Becoming a magician.
Yeah. I,
Mm.
to tell you the story really quick, I was sitting, this was peak depression. I was sitting
Mm.
at a table with some of my coworkers, a lunch table, and we were just having lunch, and one of them pulled out a deck of cards and he started doing magic tricks. And I remember
Mhm.
he showed me one in particular and it like blew my mind. Like I was like,
Mm.
oh my God, wow, that was phenomenal.
Mm.
That was insane. And
Mhm.
I like sat there and thought to myself, I was like, wow, that's the first time I've been surprised and excited in such a long time. I can't remember the last time I like
That
just
you were, like,
genuinely,
sparked.
yeah, I was like, what is this feeling? Like, and
Yeah.
I was like, I need to feel more of that. And
More
so
alive.
yeah, I was so depressed. I was like dead. I was just
Aw.
a zombie.
Mm.
And so I was like, hey guys, why don't we have contest and see who can do the best magic trick within 2 weeks, and we'll all show each other and we'll throw money in a pot. And
Mhm.
they're like, all right, whatever. And so we all put a little bit of money in. It wasn't a lot, but
Mhm.
I during that 2 weeks I got obsessed. I was like
Mm.
learning everything I could. And like at the end of the 2 weeks, I didn't have a trick. I had an entire show, basically.
Amazing. You're a beast. I
Yeah,
must say, Kris, you're a beast at
I just
everything you
get
do.
weirdly obsessed with stuff. And then yeah, I realized I kept going after that, and then to the point where like I was just annoying people. Like I'd be like, "Hey man, let me show you something," and people were like, "No, I don't want to see another magic trick, Kris." Like,
Stop.
yeah, they were like, "Please, just leave me alone." And I realized one day I was like, because the magic world it's full of creators who publish tricks, and then people that are performers. Because there's some people that are
Mhm.
just creators, they're not performers. And then
Yes.
there's some people that are just performers, they're not creators.
Mhm.
Like a lot of the big
Mhm.
guys are performers, not creators.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I realized I was like, man, I'm spending a lot of money on these tricks, and like
Mhm.
a lot of money relative at the time. But I was
Right.
like, how does this work? How do people get published? And so I started just clicking on like the site links at the bottom and
Mhm.
just reading like the
Mhm.
policies and the publisher program stuff and like all the boring things that a lot of people don't click on.
Mm.
And I figured out, I was like, okay, you have to be a partner with the website. There's a formal application process, and you
Mhm.
have to submit a trick. You have to name the methodology and all that stuff and have a video demo of the trick. And so I was like, huh, that'd be so cool if I made a trick. And then I started thinking, I'm like, well, how do I do that? And so I thought from the end back, I was like,
Yeah, reverse
yeah, I'd
engineered
be
it.
like, it'd be really cool if I could do this effect. And I was
Yes.
like, that'd be cool. I was like, so how do I do that? What are methodologies to
Mm.
get there? And
Mhm.
then I figured out some methods to be able to do it, some that I made up and some that I had borrowed from other magicians. And then I basically started working the effect, started submitting it to a couple different publications. All of them denied me at first, and then I kept refining it. And then
Mhm.
eventually I got picked up by Penguin Magic, which was like the largest publisher at the time.
Amazing.
And so, yeah, the first money I made online was selling magic tricks. And then I went on to publish
Wow.
another trick or two. And then,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay, so that's business though. Business is having an idea and reverse engineering it. So you are actually training your brain for business. Well, Kris,
yeah,
this has been highly fascinating. Thank you for turning up here
of
today.
course.
So what's your website that people can find you at?
So if you're just looking for me in general, you can just go to krisolivo.com. Or
Mm.
if you Google me, Kris Olivo, Kris with a K, Kris, you'll see I'm kind of on the first page of Google for my name for the most part. If
Mm.
you're looking for the agency, you can go to almostmagicalmarketing.com. If you're looking for endorse me and what we're doing with our platform, that's just endorseme.com with two I's instead of ME, it's MII. So yeah, check me out there. On socials, I'm at the Kris Olivo on every platform.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Kris, this has been amazing. People who are listening, thank you so much for turning up. Please subscribe, please share and show the love, and we'll see you on the next one. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.